Hello, everyone. Welcome to Barca News. My name is Mo, and welcome to a special edition of Barca News Lives. This time, we're going to be talking about the 2026 World Cup because, ladies and gentlemen, the knockout stages are finally here. And that means that we are getting closer and closer to finding out who will be the next world champion. Will it still be Argentina for a second time in a row? Will it be someone else? Now, of course, this was a historic World Cup because it's the first new expanded format where the World Cup went from 32 to 48 nations. And after 72 matches, yes, 72 matches, that's a lot of matches. We now have the knockout stages bracket all set up. We have 32 teams that have qualified to the round of 32, and we have 16 nations that have gone home. And of course, after the round of 32 is over, we're going to have 16 more nations go home as well. And this is what we're going to try to predict today. We're going to try to predict who will be the 16 teams to qualify to the round of 16 and who will be the 16 teams that will be going home. So let's see how right or wrong I am. And then, of course, as always, I invite you guys to let me know what your predictions are. So drop them in the chat section, drop them in the comment section if you're watching this after it ends. But let me know your thoughts. All right, let's begin with the bracket because, ladies and gentlemen, this is what the bracket finally looks like. This is straight from FIFA's website. So if you want to play with your own bracket, if you want to try to predict your own winner, you can head to the FIFA website and you'll find it there. It's an interactive bracket. So if you click on a team, it'll move over. All right, let's get our first match here at top of the bracket because we have Germany versus Paraguay. Germany that started the World Cup pretty strong, defeating Curaçao 7-1. Then they beat Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, 2-1 in the last minute. And then finally, they lost to Ecuador 2-1. And then, of course, we have Paraguay, who, in my opinion, have had a disappointing World Cup. First, they started the World Cup losing 4-1 against the USA. Then they beat Turkey 0-1. Not really a very impressive feat, given how terrible Turkey did in this World Cup. And then finally, they drew against Australia 0-0. I think with this one, I'm not too crazy to say that, well, I think Germany will be through to the round of 16. And if I'm not mistaken, if Germany makes it through the round of 16, I think this will be the first time they qualified to the round of 16 since they were champions in 2014. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I know they got eliminated for sure in the group stages in the 2018 Russia World Cup. They kind of suffered from that curse of the champion. But I'm thinking in 2022, they also got eliminated in the group stages. But anyways, out of Germany and Paraguay, I have, of course, Germany going through. All right, now let's look at the next match, which is matchup France versus Sweden. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where I've said before, I think out of all the teams I've watched, France to me is the team that looks the scariest. I mean, the firepower that this team has, Mbappe, Dembele, Doué, Olise, Barcola. I mean, it's absolutely scary the amount of incredible players that France has. And then, of course, France has had a pretty strong World Cup so far. They started defeating Senegal 3-1. Then they beat Iraq 3-0. And then finally demolishing Norway 1-4. Even, of course, Norway did start most of their subs. As far as Sweden, they started out strong, beating Tunisia 5-1. But then they got absolutely destroyed at the hand of Netherlands 5-1. And finally, they drew against Japan. I think this one is pretty easy. I have, of course, France moving through the next round with a Germany versus France in the round of 16. Mamma mia, what a match that will be. All right, now, South Africa versus Canada. In fact, this one is an exciting one because it starts in less than an hour. That will be the first official match of the round of 32. Of course, I'm going to be watching it. The only match of the round of 32 for today, Sunday. South Africa, of course, started the World Cup losing at the hands of the hosts, Mexico 2-0. They even saw a red card. Then they drew against Czech Republic 1-1. And then finally, in their last match, they won against South Korea 1-0. And as far as Canada, they started the only host nation to not win their first match, their opening match. They drew against Bosnia and Herzegovina 1-1. They beat Qatar 6-0, a total demolishing, and then they lost at the hands of Switzerland 2-1. This one, it's a little bit tougher to predict, but I really think Canada will go through over South Africa. I think I actually had very high hopes for Canada last World Cup. I think they have an incredible young generation, but they got eliminated in the group stages, and then in this World Cup, they haven't had the best start to the World Cup. But I still think that this Canadian team, it's I don't want to say a strong team, but definitely a better team than the previous versions that we've seen from Canada. Probably their best team yet. But I think Canada versus South Africa, I have Canada going through. Now, Netherlands versus Morocco. This one for me is an absolute shame that these two teams are meeting each other in the round of 32. I think it's going to be way too early for either of these teams to leave in the round of 32. I would love to see these teams, advance more in the World Cup. So it's an absolute shame that they're meeting each other in the round of 32. I think it would have been nice to see this matchup, I don't know, in the quarterfinals or at least in the round of 16. But this one's going to be tough. This one's going to be a very, very tough match. We're talking about two different philosophies. The Netherlands, of course, possession, attack, moving the ball quickly. Morocco, more of a defensive team, a very strongly defensive team. This is going to be one hell of a match, one of the most exciting matches we're going to see in the round of 32. Of course, Morocco, they started the World Cup drawing against Brazil 1-1, and they defeated Scotland 1-0, and then they beat Haiti 4-2. Netherlands, they started with a draw as well, 2-2 against Japan, then that 5-1 against Sweden, and finally 3-1 against Tunisia. Again, this one could go either way, but I'm gonna go with the Netherlands because they do have some pretty strong firepower up front. But again, this one could be either way, but I think the Netherlands for me is going to be going through. Then another incredible match, Portugal versus Croatia. This one's also going to be a little bit tough to predict. Portugal, I gotta say, I expected more of them, after they won the Nations League against Spain, even though I thought that they won that all thanks to the horrible decisions by De La Fuente, but I'm not going to go there, and it's not the time to talk about Spain. But I expected more of Portugal, especially after yesterday's match against Colombia. What an effort by Colombia. But I saw Portugal completely overwhelmed by Colombia. I expected a little bit more from them. And then, of course, as far as Croatia, they're always a strong team, but there is an asterisk there because now a lot of their good players are, of course, much older. This is not the same Croatia from 2022. Is definitely not the same Croatia from 2018 when they made it all the way to the final against France. So this one, again, two teams that on paper should be doing better, but in reality, they've let me down a little bit. But now let's see. Portugal, of course, started the World Cup drawing against Congo 1-1, or the DRC, I should say. They beat Uzbekistan 5-0, and then yesterday they drew against Colombia. Croatia, they started losing 4-2 against England, but then they beat Panama 1-0, and then they beat Ghana 2-1. So with this one, I have Portugal going through, but I think it's going to be a really tough match for Portugal. This is not going to be an easy match for Portugal whatsoever. It might even go to extra time, but I think we're going to have another incredible matchup there. Now, the next match is España, Lamine Yamal's Spain versus Austria. I got to say, another team that has disappointed me a little bit. Spain, we all had Spain, or at least I had Spain as one of the favorites to take the World Cup, especially with the incredible generation of players that they have. But so far, they have disappointed me. They drew against Cape Verde. They barely won against Uruguay with a lucky goal, thanks to Muslera's gaff, where he just let the ball through. And Spain hasn't started as strong as I thought they would, And I really think this is here Luis de la Fuente's fault. I really think he's a terrible coach. Yes, some people might say, well, Mo, he did win the Euros. I truly believe that he won the Euros because he was riding the coattails of Luis Enrique. I think Luis Enrique was building an incredible project. And then when they fired him, and the only reason they fired him is because they hated him. Of course, he was Barcelona player, Barcelona coach. He won the treble. That's the only reason why they hated him in Spain. And when they fired him, of course, they put Luis de la Fuente in his place. And I don't think De La Fuente had enough time to put his imprint on the team when they won the Euros. And finally, when he had spent enough time with them to put his mark on the team, we saw what happened in the Nations League. They almost blew, what was that, 4 or 5-0 lead against France because the terrible decisions that Luis de la Fuente did in the semifinal. And then they go to the final. He makes more terrible decisions. They end up losing at the hands of Portugal. We saw that match against Cape Verde, putting Gabi as a left winger, knowing that Cape Verde would park the bus, putting Ruiz and Pedri next to playing together, even though they're two incredible players. They cannot be playing together. Putting Pedri more as an attacking midfielder towards the left, a lot closer to goal. And it's like, just a series of terrible decisions by Luis de la Fuente. I don't think he still has his starting 11 figured out. I think he's still experimenting. And it's like, bro, the World Cup has already began. You should not be experimenting halfway through the World Cup. This is what the friendly matches before the World Cup are for. But anyways, I truly believe that Luis de la Fuente is the reason why Spain hasn't started as strong as we all expected them. Again, they drew against Cape Verde 0-0. They did beat Saudi Arabia 4-0. And of course, they did win against Uruguay 0-1. As far as Austria, they started the World Cup strong, beating Jordan 3-1. But then they lost 2-0 at the hands of Argentina with that double by the GOAT Leo Messi. And then they drew against Algeria 3-3 in what was an incredible match that they played yesterday. But I think with this one, I think it's going to be Spain. They're going to go through. And we're going to have an incredible round of 16 matchup between Portugal and Spain. This is going to be the repeat of the Nations League final. Then we have the USA versus Bosnia Herzegovina. The US, who are looking incredibly well. I was very, very impressed with the U.S. I think that's exactly what we needed, was a good coach with experience. Of course, Pochettino is now the coach for the United States men's national team. I really, really loved and enjoyed their opening match. They kind of went on a decline after that, but nonetheless, I think that the U.S. is looking absolutely wonderful. U.S., of course, started their World Cup defeating Paraguay 4-1. In that opening match, they defeated Australia 2-0, and then they lost to Turkey 3-2 in what was a close matchup. But of course, it was USA's B squad. I mean, Pochettino put in all the substitutes, so I think had he started his regular guys, I think the US could have beat Turkey easily. As far as Bosnia, they started the World Cup drawing against the host nation Canada. Then they lost at the hands of Switzerland 4-1, and then they did defeat Qatar 3-1. Qatar, who was probably one of the weakest nations in this World Cup. But with this one, I do have the U.S. going through ahead of Bosnia. And then we have another strong matchup, Belgium-Senegal. This one, for me, is another match where it could go either way. This is literally a coin toss. A coin toss. This one for me is going to be an incredible matchup. Again, two different philosophies. Belgium, very attack heavy. Senegal, very great at defending, but also great in those counterattacks. This one's going to, for me, is a really tough one. Of course, Belgium started the World Cup drawing against Egypt 1-1. They also drew against Iran 0-0, and then they beat New Zealand 5-1. As far as Senegal, they lost at the hands of France 3-1. Then they lost at the hands of Norway 3-2. And finally, they defeated Iraq 5-0. Again, this one is a tough for me. I think both teams are pretty equal as far as the firepower. But you know what? I'm going to go with, I think, man, this is tough. I want to say Belgium because, of course, they have a lot more individual talent. But, man, I also would love to see an upset. But let's go with Belgium. I want to say USA versus Belgium. Now, the next matchup, Brazil versus Japan. This is the final episode of the anime series. Captain, what was his name? Do you guys remember Captain something? It was a football anime show. I used to watch it as a kid. And in the final episode, it's Brazil versus Japan in the World Cup. And then, of course, it just ends, doesn't show you what the result is. So this will be the final episode. Captain, what was it called? Captain, something with an H, Hayabusa. I can't remember that anime. But anyways, if you guys remember, let me know. But Brazil versus Japan, I think this is going to be another close match. You know, on paper, obviously, you expect Brazil to just completely annihilate Japan, but this is not the same Brazil from before. In fact, this has been a little bit of a disappointing Brazil. It just doesn't inspire that much confidence. It looks kind of like Real Madrid, honestly, just a collection of great players that together look pretty bad. But Brazil started the World Cup drawing against Morocco 1-1. They beat Haiti 3-0, and then they finally beat Scotland 0-3. As far as Japan, they drew against Netherlands 2-2 in what was a pretty incredible match. They defeated Tunisia 4-0, and they drew against Sweden 1-1. I don't put it past the Japanese to be able to mount an upset and beat Brazil. I honestly think this Japan squad is a very intelligent squad, tactically speaking. They're very organized. I think they have an incredible coach who's doing a great job with the players that he has. But it is Brazil, and Brazil has a lot of individual talent that could make all the difference. So for a narrow margin, I'm going to go with Brazil, even though this is not going to be an easy match. And now, another incredible matchup, ladies and gentlemen. Ivory Coast, who have been a dark horse in this World Cup, versus Norway. Haaland's Norway. Two different teams, two different philosophies, sorry. Cote d'Ivoire, very, very strong defensively, physically, but also has incredible players like Kessier, like Jan Diamande, and of course, Norway with all its firepower. They have Haaland, they have Odegaard, they have Sorloth. This is going to be an incredible match. I cannot wait to see the Ivory Coast versus Norway. Of course, Ivory Coast started beating Ecuador 1-0. They lost to Germany in the last minute, 2-1, and then they beat Curacao 2-0. And then Norway, they started. Wait, hold on. My computer just froze on me, and this is not a good time to be freezing on me, computer. What are you doing? You guys can still see me. I hope you guys can still see me. Otherwise, no, there we go. Okay, I restored it finally. Okay, there we go. Norway started, of course, defeating Iraq 4-1, and then they beat Senegal 3-0, and then they did get an ass whooping at the hands of France 1-4. But of course, they had I think they had 10 substitutions, if I remember that correctly. Pretty much everybody was on the bench. This one, man, I don't know. This is a coin toss. I mean, it could be either one. But if I had to pick one, because you have to pick one, someone's going to go through, right? I'm going to go with Norway by a narrow margin. And the only reason I'm picking Norway is because of Haaland. You know, we've seen Haaland can single-handedly win you matches. You just got to pass on the ball, man. If you pass on the ball in the box, Haaland is scoring. So this is the only reason I'm picking Norway, but it could be either one, honestly. And then, of course, let me know what you guys think. Then we have Mexico, Ecuador. This was a tough one for me as well. Of course, Mexico has a lot of things going in their favor. They have more experience in the number 9 with Jimenez, with Santi Jimenez, as opposed to Ecuador, even though Ecuador's number 9, I forgot his name, he's a million years old, but I feel like Santi Jimenez is a lot more lethal. Also, Mexico has the home advantage, but nonetheless, don't sleep on Ecuador. Ecuador did finish the South American qualifications in second place ahead of nations like Brazil. And they just came off beating Germany, which, of course, is a huge confidence boost. Now, to look at the results, of course, Mexico started the World Cup beating South Africa 2-0. They beat Czech Republic 0-3. And then they also beat South Korea 1-0, the first time in their history to win all three matches and qualify to the next round, having won all three matches. And also, they did not concede a single goal. An incredible feat by Mexico. Not even Argentina, the current champions, were able to do that because, of course, yesterday they conceded against Jordan. Ecuador, they started out bad. They lost against Cote d'Ivoire 1-0. They drew against Curaçao. It looked like they were out. And then they came back and defeated Germany 2-1. So this one is a very tough one for me. But I'm going to go by a tiny margin with Ecuador. Tiny margin, even though this could easily also go the other way, especially with Mexico having the home advantage. The only reason I'm not picking Mexico because I think they do have a young project right now. They have a new project under Aguirre, who later on is going to be taken on by Rafa Marquez. So I think Mexico still needs a little bit more. I think by next World Cup, they're going to be much, much, much better. But again, this is a coin toss. This could go either way. But I think we have an incredible matchup. Now, next match, England versus Cape Verde. Cape Verde, the big surprise of the World Cup, ladies and gentlemen. It's not an island, it's a group of island, but a series of islands that have a population of 500,000 people doing what they did in the World Cup. I mean, is absolutely amazing. I mean, just qualifying to the World Cup alone was an incredible feat. And then the series of matchup of results that we saw make it even that much more impressive. Now, Cape Verde started the World Cup drawing against Spain 0-0. I mean, what an effort that was. That was an incredible match. Then they drew against Uruguay 2-2. And then they finally drew against Saudi Arabia. That one for me was a surprise. I really thought Cape Verde was going to beat Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia was one of the weakest teams in the entire World Cup. But nonetheless, the fact that they drew against Spain, that was an amazing feat. Of course, England started out strong, beating Croatia 4-2. They drew against Ghana 0-0, and then finally they beat Panama 2-0. I think this one I gotta go with England because they have players like Birmingham, they have players like Harry Kane. So of course we do have to go with England, which of course would be sad because it would be ending the amazing and heroic path that Cape Verde has had. Next one, we have Argentina versus Cape Verde. I already see, by the way, a lot of Penaldo fanboys going crazy online saying that FIFA have done this on purpose. They've given Argentina an easy pathway. It is like, bro, the bracket is chosen before the teams are even chosen. Second, the teams are chosen through a lottery system in the group. So there's no way to know what team's going to end up where. And even if the groups were somehow rigged, bro, there's no way to know where each team would end up. Is going to be first, second, or third. And then finally, Portugal could have been on this side of the bracket had they defeated Congo. Belgium could have been on this side of the bracket as well. There's a lot of teams that could have been on this side of the bracket. Big teams that didn't do what they were supposed to do, and therefore they ended up on the other side of the bracket. So this is nothing more than a coping mechanism. This is the same reason why Penaldo fans say that the 2022 World Cup was rigged, because unfortunately no one ever taught them how to deal with losses, how to deal with defeat, how to deal with disappointment. So instead, they have to look for external justification, right? I didn't fail the exam because I didn't study. I failed the exam because the teacher hates me. I wasn't fired because I'm a terrible employee. I was fired because my manager hates me, right? And it's the same thing. I did not, Argentina didn't win because they deserved to win. No, Argentina won because it's rigged. So they're just setting it up because, well, they try to find an excuse somehow, some way to justify it. So they're already setting it up to where Argentina wins. They're like, oh, see, I told you it's rigged. But obviously, if Argentina don't win, all of a sudden it's going to be a fair competition, because that's how these underdeveloped mindsets work, right? If the guy that I want wins, that means it's all fair. If he doesn't, that means it's all rigged. But anyways, oh, by the way, I made a mistake. I confused the Congo, the DRC's flag with Cape Verde. That was my bad. I apologize. It's England versus Congo. England versus Congo, not Cape Verde. I apologize about that. It's Argentina versus Cape Verde. England versus DRC or the Congo, which, by the way, were also a surprise in this World Cup. I did not expect much from the DRC. I thought there's gonna be one of those teams that just goes home early, but they actually had a pretty incredible run, and they started with that draw against Portugal, 1-1, and then they did lose at the hands of Colombia 1-0, but then they came back and they defeated Uzbekistan 3-1. So Congo also, the DRC here, also having an incredible run, but I'm still gonna choose England, of course, because given the heavyweight names that England has, including Harry Kane, Birmingham, and the rest. And now we talk about Argentina versus Cape Verde. I had those two confused. I apologize. But Argentina, of course, they started the World Cup 3-0 against Algeria. A hat trick by the GOAT, Lionel Messi. Then 2-0 against Austria. A double by the GOAT, Messi. And then finally, last night, defeating Jordan 3-1. Another goal by Messi. He now has 6 goals in 3 matches at the age of 39 in the World Cup. The first player to score in 7 consecutive World Cups. Also, the oldest player to score a hat trick at a World Cup. An incredible World Cup for Leo Messi. As far as Cape Verde, of course, we already discussed the results. 0-0 against Spain, 2-2 against Uruguay, 0-0 against Saudi Arabia. Here, of course, I do have Argentina going through against Cape Verde. And then we come to Australia versus Egypt. This one for me is a tough one as well. I think this is going to be a pretty close matchup. This is another match where I think it really could be a coin toss, right? I don't know. Either one of these could be good. Of course, Egypt has Hamza Abdel Karim, who has been getting some quality minutes as Egypt's number 9. But Australia started the World Cup beating Turkey 2-0. They lost at the hands of the U.S. 2-1. And then they drew against Paraguay. As far as Egypt, they started drawing against Belgium 1-1. They defeated New Zealand 3-1. And then finally, they drew against Iran. And here, again, this could go either way. But I feel like, man, this is tough. Honestly, either one can go through, but I feel like Australia might be a little bit more organized and they could go through. But you know what? I'm going to go with the opposite. I want to go with Egypt versus Argentina. Then we have Switzerland versus Algeria. Switzerland versus Algeria. I got to say something about Algeria. I did expect a little bit more from them. But yesterday's match against Austria was really a really incredible effort by them. I don't know if they started out the World Cup a little slow, and that's why we saw the results that we saw. But Switzerland, of course, started the match, the World Cup drawing against Qatar 1-1, which was very surprising for me. Again, Qatar, one of the weakest teams in the World Cup. Then they beat Bosnia 4-1, and then they finally beat Canada 2-1. And as far as Algeria, they started losing, of course, at the hands of Argentina 3-0. They beat Jordan 2-1, and then yesterday they drew against Austria 3-3. This one is a very tough one for me, but I am gonna go with Switzerland. And finally, Colombia, man. Colombia's having an incredible World Cup. The way they dominated Portugal yesterday was absolutely amazing. The only thing I gotta say about Colombia is they really need to work on their decision making on that final touch. Colombia yesterday reminded me of Vinicius Jr. when he first started his career at Real Madrid, where he would do like amazing things like beat defenders with his speed, beat defenders with his dribbling, and then he would make it to the box, to the penalty box, and then he would either shoot when he was supposed to pass or pass when he was supposed to shoot. And his decision-making was just horrible. And that was Colombia pretty much for me yesterday. Colombia completely dominated Portugal. They could have easily won that match 3-4, 5-0. But their final touch was just horrible. The decision-making was horrible. But nonetheless, Colombia having an incredible World Cup. And, of course, Ghana also having a very good World Cup. Ghana also one of those very defensive, physical teams in the World Cup. Colombia, very attack heavy. So we're going to see, again, two opposing philosophies go head to head. Of course, Ghana started the World Cup beating Panama 1-0. They drew against England and they lost at the hands of Croatia 2-1. Colombia, they beat Uzbekistan 3-1. They beat the DRC 1-0, and yesterday they drew against Portugal. Even though I thought that they got robbed, I think that penalty, we saw that offside. I'm starting to call it the Lewandowski offside because the toe of the player was offside. But anyways, with this one, I have Colombia going through. So this is what my bracket looks like for the round of 16. Germany versus France, which I think would be an incredible match. Canada versus the Netherlands. Portugal versus Spain, which again would be an incredible match. The US versus Belgium. Brazil versus Norway. Ecuador versus England. That's going to be an incredible match as well. Argentina versus Egypt. And finally, Switzerland versus Colombia. And my question to you is, what is your prediction? What teams do you have going through? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Let me know, of course. We're going to revisit this video in the future to see how badly or how well did I predict this. Let's do a few comments and then we'll end this because, of course, in a little bit, we're going to have the round of 32 kickoff with Canada versus South Africa. Victor Benny says, yes, Bo Bisca Barca, always amen, my friend. And my friend Al-Haji Bieber says, safe from Sierra Leone here in the chat section. Welcome, welcome. And CXY. Oh, wait, never mind. What is up with all these spamming? Let's see. Billy, what up, Billy? What's up, my Vegas brother? How you doing? Bad Boy says, hey, Mo, good to see you posted live on a Sunday. Thank you. I appreciate it. And Nathan says, Spain does not convince me on winning the World Cup the way they played against Uruguay and Cape Verde. 100% agree with that. I think there's a lot of work they're going to need to do if they hope to win this World Cup. And Cole Cam says, asking me, it's France versus Argentina in the finals, but France go through. The youth and attack is deadly. Reminds me of MSN. Bro, France looks absolutely scary. To me, it's been the scariest team I've seen so far. Barca Daddy says Spain won't come to semi. No real attacker without Lamine. De La Fuente is a terrible coach. 100% agree with you. It Willie says Mo is just toasting the African teams out at the end. No, I'm not toasting them. Actually, I thought African nations have done absolutely amazing. Maybe South Africa to me was kind of like the weaker one. I didn't see a lot from them, especially against Mexico. But the rest, I mean, Ivory Coast, man, Ivory Coast looking amazing. Ghana, Senegal, what Cape Verde has done. I mean, I thought Africa has been incredibly well represented in this World Cup. They have done tremendously. And, I know I had Ivory Coast going out against Norway, but that could easily be Ivory Coast through the next round because Ivory Coast is just amazing. I think, again, a dark horse in this World Cup. As far as Ghana versus Colombia is just like, man, Colombia just looks very strong. I don't know if they'd be able to do. Oh, Belgium versus Senegal. I easily see Senegal going through as well. I know I picked Belgium, but Senegal could definitely go through there. And Netherlands versus Morocco. Again, could easily be the Morocco through as well. I mean, we have some incredible matchups in the round of 32, and a lot of matchups where it could easily be either team. I mean, let's see. Pitcher says, hello, Mo, could Julian really be ideal? Shouldn't we go for Groupie instead? So Groupie is also going to cost a lot of money. They're saying north of 100 mil. So if you're going to have to shell out insane amounts of money for either one, obviously Julian would make more sense because 26 in his prime, plenty of experience, right? He's played in the Premier, he's played in La Liga, which is very important. World Cup winner, Copa de America winner. So if you, as opposed to Krupi, he's 19 years old, still pretty young. He just played barely his first season with in the Premier League. So if you're going to have to shell out insane amounts of money for either one, might as well go with the one who's has a proven track record. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I mean, Krupi would be amazing. But and Pitcher says, and I am looking forward to Argentina versus Cape Verde. Yeah, that's going to be a tough match for Argentina. But here's the difference between a team like Spain, for example, that face off against Cape Verde, and a team like Argentina. I feel like Spain underestimated Cape Verde. I don't see Argentina doing that. I mean, look at yesterday. Jordan was probably one of the worst teams in the World Cup. And yes, Scaloni put in a group of substitutes, but those groups of substitutes came out swinging. Like they came out like they were playing against France, even though it was Jordan, and even though they were subs, and even though they were guaranteed the next spot. So I don't see Argentina underestimating Cape Verde. I see them coming out and playing them like it's Brazil in the final or something, right? So that's the difference. But anyways, that is all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this first of its kind live or podcast where we'll discuss the World Cup. I know this is a Barca news channel, but we have to talk about the World Cup because, after all, it is the biggest football event in the world. Let me know what your predictions are down below. Let me know what I got right, or what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong, because obviously none of us can know for sure until the actual results come through. So let me know what predictions you think are wrong, what predictions you think I'm right. And then, of course, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, and as always, peace, guys.